Welcome back to the Spin Cycle Podcast, everybody. I'm Caley Fretz.
I'm Jonny Long.
I'm Kit Nicholson.
Today on the show, Tom Pidcock is going nowhere. Chris Froome admits he will not win the Tour de France again, and Wout van Aert might be a squirrel. Let's get to it. All right, let's kick off the episode as we like to do with an update on Tom Pidcock and what Tom Pidcock is up to. Obviously, we brought you the breaking news last week that he was leaving INEOS. So this week, we'd like to bring you the breaking news that he's not. What's happening?
Corrections Corner.
Corrections Corner. Well, it's not really Corrections.
It's not really Corrections Corner, yeah.
I was talking about this with, I'm going to leave this person unnamed, but I was talking about this because we've now had, well, I guess me specifically, I've had two kind of breaking stories on the transfer front in the last 6 months. One was Roglic, and then the other one was Pidcock, and neither one ended up happening the way that I said it was going to happen.
You got Casper Asgreen, though.
I did get Asgreen, yeah.
There you go.
But it's important to remember that what we're reporting is actually like some team wants this rider. There is no guarantee that they will actually get them. And that appears to be what's happened this time, right? So Q365 was absolutely in to get Tom Pidcock. They really wanted to get Tom Pidcock. It appears they will not get Tom Pidcock. So what's Tommy Boy doing?
My understanding of the situation is that INEOS was obviously shopping around for a replacement, which they failed to find. So they were like, no, sorry, we're going to keep this chap. He's good for us. But it seems just like, after everything that's happened, you know, being withdrawn from Il Lombardia, some interesting quotes from over the weekend from Ethan Hayter saying it's just a weird environment and it got worse after he confirmed he was leaving the team. So surely the very public desire to leave the team is not going to be good for Pidcock. But they've basically just kind of, I don't know, stormed out of negotiations. Like, nah, we don't, there's nobody else. We need him. Which is just, it seems a bit like self-sabotage to me. But I don't know.
I have to say that as three people that make a podcast, I feel like we should be in favor of this because the available storylines in 2025 with Tom Pidcock in INEOS are probably significantly superior to the available storylines of him just on a team that he likes being in, right? This is good. This is good for us.
I think there's never going to be a situation where Pidcock is perfectly happy at a team that he is in. One of the quotes that I found over the weekend, which I think is a bit old now, it was referring to one of the earlier breaking stories with regards to Tom Pidcock. So about, 2 weeks ago, when it was said that he operates in pretty much separately to the team anyway, because he's even got his own doctor, which probably makes sense. It's not as big of a story as it might sound because he does have a independent calendar over the winter in the cyclocross and even over the summer with mountain biking. But yeah, it sounds like he's definitely already in a bit of a silo. It seems like there are a couple of teams who are still in the picture, but given the amount of money that they would, INEOS are not going to let him. It seems like INEOS are not going to let him go now unless they get a complete buyout, because part of the story with Q36.5 was that they were prepared to pay part of his salary. So Red Bull, Bora Hansgrohe, obviously has got lots of money, and he's already got an existing relationship with Red Bull as an individual. But Tudor Pro Cycling is apparently in talks with Red Bull as well, so they might be an option for Pidders, but that doesn't make any sense for him because can you imagine Pidcock and Mark Hirschi and Julian Alaphilippe on the same team?
Wait, so Red Bull are going to sponsor both Tudor and Bora Hansgrohe. Is that the idea?
I think it's barely more than rumour status, but it was more. Okay. I don't think they were coming on as a sponsor, or not a name sponsor necessarily, but that perhaps it was a relationship where they might be undertaking a sort of sponsorship setup. And yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things that was a surprising footnote to an already complicated story.
It's just it must be tiring for everyone. Yeah. It's just like, what is this all going on? Off season's supposed to be, time to relax, recoup. With Tom Pidcock, I mean, you can
He's got
probably
3
put
more
the
years
pieces
on this
back
contract.
together. Is it 3 years? I was going to ask.
3 years.
3 years.
Well, they were saying there was a $12 million buyout to get the rest of the contract, right? Mm-hmm. Which would check out because he's probably on $3-4 million a year
before bonuses.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I think we can be fairly confident that INEOS will just get their act together sooner about finding a replacement, and he will leave this time next year if he doesn't leave in the next few weeks with a big buyout. He's not going to still be in INEOS in 3 years.
Things can change though, things start clicking again or INEOS stop being weird. Like the
we're
Ethan
not
Hayter stuff.
talking funding,
That
though. We're
seems
talking
unlikely.
personalities, aren't we? I think, and not to say that any of the parties are in the wrong necessarily, but I think it seems like there's the vibes don't jive. It's
Well, we had that with like Alaphilippe though, with Quick Step, and then there was like, oh, maybe they will get back together, and I think when it's such a close knit sport, it's easy for these things to not be like with other sports. It's like contracts and transfers and trades and stuff are all seen just as part of the business, and it's like no, it's never personal. Whereas I think probably because of the exertion and just the time on the road and with the teams, and like they like to brand themselves up as like big families and stuff like that, it probably does end up feeling like mighty personal when either you're not getting like offered the same deals or they're not letting you do what you want to do. I don't know. But I don't know, like Ethan Hayter, that's the weirder one for me. Like the Tom Pidcock transfer falling through, fair enough. But when he was like,
Ethan Hayter doesn't seem like a personality that would rub up against anybody.
Or even more than that, not say it out loud to like the media when not really asked to go into as much detail as he did. Which, respect. It's a good way to show just how like pissed off you are with everything. But the idea that they were unhelpful after he decided to leave because of things that had gone on or whatever, it's just wild. Like what advert is that for riders coming in? It's like, well, as soon as you decide you want to go somewhere else, then that's it. See you later. It's quite a Patrick Lefevre move, isn't it? Well, not old school Patrick Lefevre move, maybe.
It's a super Lefevre move.
Yeah.
I mean, all this comes back to, like, yes, I think it's clear that Pidcock has been somewhat difficult to work with, but it comes back to INEOS. It just keeps coming back to INEOS that, like, it's not just him. It's not just personality conflict. It's not just, like, there's just stuff going on in that team that makes it a really hard place to perform at your best. And the other thing to keep in mind is these athletes are world-class athletes that got to where they are for a reason, right? One, some pretty stellar genetics, but two, generally a pretty focused worldview, right? Like a desire to be the absolute best that they can be. And so an inability to do that and your own team getting in the way of that was probably among the most frustrating things that they could possibly sort of come up against.
Yeah.
And
when you're tied into
me,
that,
like when... Yeah, and like when with the Ethan Hayter stuff in particular, that's what I was picking up out of that, is just this sort of huge frustration with, I'm a good bike racer, I want to be a good bike racer, and this stupid team is preventing me from doing that.
Well, and he's like one of the most, I can't remember the other word. I know winningest is an awful word, but like he's the one who takes the most prolific. Thank you, Kit. I always knock around you. He's the one who like wins them. He's the one who makes sure they don't have like 12 wins a season because he goes to Tour of Poland or whatever, gets a couple stages, takes an overall somewhere else. Like he was one of the guys that would ensure that there was at least something to show, even if they were only podium and a Giro d'Italia. It's bizarre.
They might be setting up a Devo team though.
Oh yeah,
or rather buying one.
Yeah,
right.
let's get to Dan Benson watch. What's Benson bringing us this week?
Well, he teased us all with the German flag emoji over the weekend, which suggested there might be a big Pidders news story with regards to transfer to an aforementioned Red Bull sponsored team. But in actual fact, it's INEOS are in talks with a German Conti team. But our friend Dan Benson also said he'd got no comment from the owner of the team as it stands. It could be a red herring thrown out by INEOS to get us to stop talking about Pidcock, which isn't working. But because we
need something juicier than that. We need the Richard Pluga like beer. Like that. That's a proper diversion tactic.
Yeah.
This is
not
not
buying
enough.
a German continental team.
This is nowhere near enough.
Nope.
Do you reckon next week we're going to be able to have a week off talking about INEOS?
No.
It would be nice to just have a little break, a bye week, an INEOS bye week. That's what I'm asking for.
I think given the story that we're working on, probably not, Johnny.
Well, and they need to stop so we can get it finished. Maybe this is the larger media play, is that more stuff keeps happening.
Write anything
and then,
because it's always,
I'm gonna pass away and then like a long lost relative will have to finish it for me. Something like that.
And then they'll make a film about it.
It's not that good.
No, about the process of writing it, not the story itself.
Okay, I see.
All right. It's time. That's enough. That's enough INEOS for this week. We're going to take a quick break and talk about a rider who used to ride for INEOS.
Oh, goody.
Oh, goody. Welcome back, everybody. Let's talk Chris Froome. Who was the quote that said it was the worst signing in the history of pro cycling?
It was Michael Rasmussen.
I like Michael Rasmussen.
Yeah.
He definitely has got some good sound bites for sure.
He's got some great sound bites. He's always in the Tour de France press room these days. Like he's just wandering around. He's working for Danish TV or something like that. And I don't know. He feels like one of those riders who's like very kind of comfortable. And maybe that's not the right word, but he's sort of like fully acknowledged the things that happened and has sort of like been able to put them behind him in a way that's much more authentic than other riders that got caught up in all of that. Because he was like, yes, I screwed up. Yes, blah, blah, blah. But I've sort of moved past it. And now he's a great commentator. And this is a really funny quote. I think it's something that we've said on this podcast before,
More
actually.
or less, yeah.
That it was, potentially one of the worst signings in sort of the modern pro cycling history. In that, I mean, what did we say Froome was on? Like $5 million a year ish.
Like that, yeah.
Give us the full quote. Have we read the full quote?
It simply has to be the worst cycling signing in world history for a cycling team. It's actually quite a mouthful, that sentence. Not for Froome, though, because it is a fantastic pension scheme that he has started there.
Oh, yeah. Like, great for him. His agent, nice work.
Well, it is probably
Excellent
quite
work.
good for Israel Premier Tech too. But
no,
not in a sporting sense.
They've got invites to things and they get press.
Yeah, I absolutely don't mean on the results sheets.
Yeah.
But I mean...
Yeah. And if you're as rich as Sylvan Adams, you don't really care about the $5 million. So it's sort of a worthwhile,
He did start caring, though. He did start caring.
He did start caring after a little while. But anyway, the other quote that we're talking about here is Chris Froome finally sort of putting his hand up and saying, I am not going for a big result this next season. Right. So sort of the finally kind of admitting that his body has not been the same in the last couple of years and that he is not going to be able to come back to where he was prior to that horrible crash at the Dauphiné. And he won't be, gunning for a Tour de France victory this year, which is kind of a sad thing. Like that's you don't like to hear an athlete kind of acquiescing to time like that. Like it's rough, but at the same time, I think it's probably good that he goes into a season with realistic expectations, both for himself and the team. And, because like every time he'd say something, oh yeah, I'm going to try to win this. I'm trying to get back to my best self. It would just sort of open him up for ridicule.
He was followed
and that's
around
not what you
by
want
a lot
either.
of that sort of discourse, wasn't he? Yeah.
Well, you just what would happen is then every race you just have mostly Belgian and Dutch reporters going up to him, just asking him the same question of like, oh, so, what's like, and they ask it in such a blunt way of like, you used to be good, you're shit now. And then they don't even like there's no question mark on any part of a word they say.
Yeah.
For Froome, it strikes me as that he probably had to keep telling himself that he was working towards some sort of trajectory that would involve a win at some point, just to keep going. Whereas I guess if you're entering a final year, you can kind of be like, well, I'm so close to the end now, I can just kind of enjoy it and take it all in, rather than having to motivate yourself to try and do something performance-wise. I don't know. They just handed a year-long extension to Israel did to Jakob Fuglsang as well. Oh, so they're clearly like still enjoying. I'm pretty sure
maybe it was a year long, and then he's going to retire at the end of next year, sort of thing.
That was it. But yeah, so it seems that Israel is still in the mood for
pension schemes.
Yeah, seems to enjoy it. So good for him as well. He's probably on decent wage as well. Maybe when I hit my mid-30s, I can sort of slide into some highly paid grift over there. That wouldn't be that bad. The thing with Froome is that while he has not been performing, he's still held himself and conducted himself with as much grace as he's kind of always had when dealing with just everyone. Me and Ian obviously bumped into him, we didn't bump into him. We went up and accosted him in Norway, just annoying him with questions of his bag full of big pens for signing signatures.
That was a funny piece.
That was fun. And then he's also been in Guangxi, which you know unfairly called the punishment tour often. He would have had a great time over there. He would have been a huge celebrity. Probably enjoyed rolling back the years on.
And he probably still sticks around for the criteriums, the Tour de France criteriums out there.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, he's still out there, probably on his way to Singapore, right? So he's there. He's doing all the things that the 5 million was paid for, right? Because it was part performance, but it was also part like you are big celeb. You're gonna sort of what's the word?
He's the pretty woman or the unicorn on front of the ship.
Yeah. Well, it's before that. Israel weren't really a team that were taken, like, they were fairly new on the block, and they weren't taken too seriously, were they?
No.
And when Froome started to go there, everyone was kind of like, okay, they're a team now. They're a proper team.
Well, our good friend Chris Marshall-Bell has just joined the little staging area. So I think that's enough Chris Froome for today. Welcome, Chris.
Hello. How are you all?
The notorious CMB.
Some say notorious, some say annoying, some say a pain in the ass, and anything else?
Well, so we brought you on. We brought you on this week because you wrote a story for us last week on the UCI, not just exploring, but sort of actively pursuing budget caps within the World Tour, within the men's World Tour specifically. And we just wanted to talk about that a little bit with you. So I know that you can't, you're not going to reveal sources. You're not going to tell us where this information came from. But can you give me a little bit of backstory on your understanding of kind of like why they're pursuing this, why they're looking into this, and what it might kind of do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that an idea of a budget cap or a salary cap, it's not completely new in cycling. Like, people have been talking about this for years and years and years because it's not necessarily a competitive playing field, or it's not a level playing field across the sport. And it's never been that way, and it probably never will be that way as well. But I first started hearing about this kind of the beginning of the year. And then I heard a little bit about it at the tour, but then in late September, I was given a document which outlined how the UCI was working with a Swiss consultancy firm who've previously helped other sports like European football and F1 introduce financial regulation methods as well. And I feel like the reason this is being pushed now is that the UCI have their 2026 World Tour reforms coming in 12 months. We still don't really know what that actually is, but they like to say, hey, we've got these reforms coming. It's going to be amazing. It's part of
cycling.
That. Oh, yeah. Exactly. So it's part of that. And I think it's also a reaction to the dominance we've seen in the last 2 years. Now, in 2023, obviously, Jumbo-Visma won all 3 Grand Tours. They didn't really have a fantastic season in 2024, but UAE Team Emirates won pretty much every bike race that they termed up to. I think they've won 82 and still counting, I guess, because cycling never really ends. So I think it's a proactive measure, because this is something that has been on the back burner for years, but it's reactive as well to the situation that we find ourselves in. And I know we'll probably go into depth in a little bit in a second, but if I can just say, from the document that we've seen, the richest 6 teams in cycling collectively account for 55% of all rider salaries. And the richest team, which unconfirmed, but I think we know who it is, UAE, spends more on staff than the poorest 8 teams. So you can see that there's a massive discrepancy across the board.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch in that document that is wild. And in fact, I think we're going to maybe pull a couple more stories out of that particular document. Like, what was the other? The equipment one was one of the ones that struck me. Was it 4.7? The top team was spending 4.7 million on equipment. And the bottom team was spending 100,000.
Like the prepared journalist I am, Caley Fretz, I've turned up with the document in front of me. So the top 2 teams, which we think UAE and Visma, spent 4.7 million on equipment this year. The bottom team spent 100,000. The least rich 9 bottom teams all spent less than 1.5 million euros on equipment, and UAE and Jumbo spent 4.7 million.
And we don't know exactly how they're defining equipment, but we can make some guesses, right? It's everything from wind tunnel time to the bikes themselves to all the rest, right? And that's literally buying speed. I think that's why that one struck me, right? Is beyond salaries and beyond whatever else, the more money you spend in those areas, the faster you're going to go, right? Like it's not quite a linear relationship, but if you talk to any sort of performance manager, if you get Dan Bigham or whoever on here, they're going to tell you that, yeah, if you spend more money, you buy nicer skin suits, you can do all the bike, wind tunnel testing, et cetera, et cetera. That one really struck me as just like, okay, regardless of talent, if cycling is a sport of people and not bikes, that is the opposite, right? Like that's a place where, yeah, it's Ronan's world, but it's also this place where you've got teams that have a default automatic from day one advantage going into a season because their stuff is just better. And there's a whole bunch of examples like that. So let's get back to the sort of budget caps more specifically. So first of all, we're not talking about just salary caps, which is what is often thrown around in like American sports. Like most of the big American leagues have some version of a salary cap. These are sort of overall team budget caps, right?
That is correct. So if something was to be introduced, it wouldn't be limiting salary caps, as you say. The idea is that it would be a limit on the amount a team can spend on entire operations, which includes rider salaries, team salaries, equipment, travel, and all of that stuff. Now, one person said to me who was for the budget cap, said the idea is not that we will reduce an average salary of a team, an average budget of a team. So I think right now the average team budget is 28 million euros. The idea is not that goes down to 22 million. Ideally, it will go up to 37 million. But the idea is that all the teams will be closer in budget. And the way you could potentially do that is something called a luxury tax, which basically that works by if you have a limit on rider salary. So let's just invent a number. This is not being given to me. This is me purely inventing figures here. Let's say that a team cannot spend more than 15 million euros on rider salaries a year, but a team spends 16.7. They would be penalized, and that extra 1.7 million euros, they would have to find that from a different source and then pay that back into the system. And then that 1.7 million euros could then be used to give into other teams. So then by that, then you are making all the teams closer together in overall budget. Now, that's just one idea being mooted, but some hybrid system of a budget cap and a luxury tax is what is preferred by the UCI.
Sounds like communism, Chris.
Exactly like communism, Jonny.
One of the questions I saw come up quite a bit over the weekend was that, but I don't know, cycling is not the richest sport on the planet by any stretch. And there are a lot of people who are saying, just let them earn what they can. If they can get a good salary, then by all means. And that made me think about the individual, because the individual sponsorships presumably wouldn't then feature. So you've got riders like Pogacar or Cavendish's old pistachio sponsor from back in the day, shoes, helmets, all that sort of thing. That wouldn't stop, would it? But I suppose that might again make a bigger division because it would still only be attracted to big names.
Well, the one thing as well is that every sport that has, or anything that has like rules or regulations or salary budget caps, there's always ways to fiddle the numbers. Like you see that the UK politicians are doing it now to change the way that we calculate all of our public budgets and stuff like that. Like all these numbers are just sort of, you can find ways to make it look different.
Cook the books.
So
I think it's unfair to suggest that the people in power like to find loopholes, Jonny. Come on, everyone plays. Everyone plays by the rules now.
Richard Plugger he's probably enjoying it because he's like, here's a way that I can sit in my big, my big chair at my big desk and come up with new ways and just say that I'm going for beers with Thibaut Pinot while really I'm cooking the books.
Whoa, Jonny.
Okay, sorry.
To be clear, Richard Pluggett's not cooking the books.
Cooking the books in a legal way.
So what's the reaction to this, Chris? Like, what are are teams in favor? Are teams opposed? Are people they're not even sure yet? I mean, this is only, like you said, it's been chatted about all year, but the document we have was presented in what was at Worlds, right?
Yes.
So there hasn't been that much time for teams to kind of digest this and really think it through yet, right? But what's the immediate reaction?
Correct. So I got in touch with 9 World Tour managers last week, so that's half of them, and not one of them wanted to comment publicly, just because conversations are delicate. Either they don't like me, probably that, or
the ones I got in touch with all told me to get in touch with somebody else who didn't also want to talk.
Oh, classic.
I mean, it's amazing because it's amazing how there's no like unity or cohesion in cycling, and no one's on the same page. It's amazing. But no, from what I can gather, most people aren't necessarily opposed to it. They understand why there was a bit of a clamour for a budget cap. But, and as Richard Plugger said to me on Monday, and yes, Caley, I owe you that article.
It'll go up about the same time this is going up, so it'll be perfect.
He is not necessarily against a budget cap, but he is saying that the priority in cycling should be safety and should be a reform of the sport and how it's restructured, which goes into the magical two words of one cycling, which I'm sure listeners don't need me to come back into. But he's essentially saying budget cap might work at some point down the line, but right now it doesn't make any sense because as things stand, there's no collective income, there's no collective revenue in the sport. So why are you trying to introduce a budget cap now when the structure doesn't really allow for it?
Yeah, where does the money come from? For you, if you're not going to be telling teams they can't, well, you know, obviously there's the luxury cap, but those teams that are only spending 100,000 as opposed to several million, they've still got to find that several million, and the luxury tax isn't going to cover that.
Also, does a luxury tax help the competitiveness when you've got like a Tadej Pogacar racing? Is giving Cofidis like an extra £500,000? Is that gonna even the playing field in any sort of like meaningful way? Do we think that this is actually something that works and has merit, or is it just the idea of fairness that we kind of like the sound of?
They could have held on to Victor Lafay.
I think we should have a points cap. So look at UAE buying out all the great riders. Not all of them, obviously, but they're buying a lot of great. This is completely impractical, I'm sure, but I like the idea. I suppose it's the draft, really, isn't it? Where you can only have a certain number of the top 20, or you can only have a certain number of the, I don't know, best neo pros in any one team, because otherwise you just get someone like UAE, which, you know, only 2 or 3 years ago, we were talking about Pogacar in his Tour de France challenge, but oh dear, he's got a weak team, and that is absolutely not the case anymore.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, but that was solved with millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of euros. Like that's how they solved the problem.
Yeah. But they are also buying all the hot prospects.
Yeah. I mean, it is important to note, like, it's not all money, right? I mean, we just spent, right before you jumped on, Chris, we were talking about INEOS, and they've got a lot of money and still can't get out of their own way, and everyone and all their talent is leaving. It's like, so it does require more than just cash, but cash certainly helps, right? Like, you find this in most sports. The richest teams are at the top, the poorest teams are at the bottom from a performance perspective. It's just the way it is. Personally, I think that, like you said, Chris, like the one cycling thing maybe needs to come first, or something like it, because otherwise you're just kind of lopping the top off the sport for probably very little benefit. I think, Kit, to your point, like, okay, let's say you luxury tax the hell out of UAE and you take 5 or 10 million euros off of them every single season. You distribute that to the bottom 10 teams. What do they got an extra $1 million? They got an extra 750. Like that's not enough to make any dramatic difference to Cofidis, to your point. Like, there's just that there's still 30 million euros off of where UAE is. So I think it's sort of it's sort of not enough to make a dramatic impact on the sporting spectacle. And so at that point, what's the point? Because the whole underlying theory behind this is you make the sporting spectacle better, therefore the sport can pull in more money, therefore everybody gets richer. Right, so it's a long play, but if the amount that is being moved, if the sort of progressive tax bracketing system that we're talking about is not effective enough, you're not pulling the bottom up enough, then it doesn't do anything. Then there's no point.
Just make every race a handicap race.
Yeah.
What? And start with Pogacar about 5k.
Yeah, he starts 5k back, and then he's got
really
and then
long
from
cranks or something.
Instead of kilometer zero. Like, yeah, you have the attack for the breakaway, but then it's just like it's actually worth watching like 5 hours of cycling every day at Grand Tour. It'd be great. I'll email Richard.
There was a period in time where it felt like ASO was going to try something like that. Like when they were doing the grid starts and all the other sort of nonsense.
That was quaint, wasn't it?
We haven't had one of them in a while. I feel we're due one. What are we going to have?
Felt like they were going to try
that.
What
public infrastructure is in Lille that they can use?
All right. Well, I think that's enough on budget caps for now. Make sure you go check out Chris's story. It was up on the site last week if you missed it. And then Dane also did a bit of a follow-up. If you're just confused by the whole budget cap, salary cap, all this sort of how it works, Dane did a bit of an explainer based off of the other sports that have implemented things that are kind of like this that went up on Friday. So make sure you check that out. Also check out the promised story that CMB is sending over to me sometime today, hopefully.
I can see it in front of me.
Yeah, he spoke with Richard Pluga on Monday. And so, by the time this podcast is out, that story should be up on escapecollective.com as well.
Chris, one final question I wanted to ask earlier, but I don't want to interrupt the flow. When you are sort of acquiring these clandestine documents, is it done with you wearing like a big trench coat hanging out on like a street corner at dusk, or how?
With a trilby.
Can you give us with a trilby? Can you give us much information on that, or is that top secret?
Yeah, well, what I usually do, I usually go out and steal a bike first.
Oh, clever. Then they can't trace you. Yeah,
correct. And then I'll hide out behind some bins or something, and then eventually I'll just sneak up upon my prey and
you got it.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it always works.
Very Jason Bourne.
Always works. Yes, exactly that.
Well, like I said, a story we'll keep an eye on, a story we are continuing to report. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, Wout van Aert might be a squirrel, and some very unfortunate news about Chris Hoy. And Chris, you're going to hang out. You're going to stay on the rest of the show. All right, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We're going to take the tone down a little bit in this episode. Kit, some really, really sad news about Chris Hoy came out, end of last week?
Yeah, it was Saturday night. So the last weekend of the Track World Championships were ongoing just outside Copenhagen. So, I mean, we've all known that Chris has been dealing with cancer since February when the news broke. He said his hand was forced after journalists came prying, and he revealed that he had been undergoing chemotherapy. But this news story over the weekend, he's disclosed that his cancer is incurable. After feeling that something wasn't right in his shoulder, he had a scan done, and it revealed that the cancer that had originated in his prostate had metastasized all over his body, including his shoulder, pelvis, spine, hip. And he was apparently told he had 2 to 4 years to live. And it was, obviously the weekend there was an outpouring of love, tributes, support for him and his wife, who's also in that time frame. Sarah has been diagnosed with a quote, active and aggressive form of MS. So they're both dealing with incurable diseases. But what's I think been missing from a lot of the coverage, which seems like a horrible word given what we're talking about, but anyway, he's been dealing with it all with a remarkable level of stoicism, positivity, as is his way with everything, it seems. And one of the things that he said in the interview that was with the Times was, and just like that, I learn how I will die. And yet he has big plans, and he would really like this disclosure to help change the perception of a stage 4 diagnosis, because there's a difference between terminal and incurable here. He has been undergoing treatment, and it's not palliative. It's an intervention that will, it could halt the disease, which he will live with for the rest of his life, whether it's 2, 4, even 10 years. It's something that he's dealing with, and he's going to continue to deal with while staying in the public eye, because that's his, he's going to continue doing his job. He said he's feeling strong and positive. So he's an amazing guy. He's an amazing and inspiring guy, a very lovely chap. I've met him a couple of times, and he's, you wouldn't wish it on anybody. But it just seems so unfair. But I think it's important to, do what he is doing to a degree, and try and look at it with the positive slant that he is, in that this is an opportunity to, like you said, stage 4 is not the end. There's a lot more left to live. And he's hoping to make that happen via a charity fundraising bike ride called Tour de Four. And he's also releasing a memoir next month. Heartfelt feelings going out towards Chris Hoy, but also just, wow, he's continuing to inspire even with this gut-wrenching disclosure.
Well, and also when his hand has been forced to reveal deeply personal sort of medical news, because
twice now.
The press are running with it, and to deal with it in a way that was, gracious is the wrong word, but to deal with it in like a level way, because I think that must be a very difficult thing, not just for you, but for your family to have to go through, for this to all be brought out into the public.
And knowing that it will come out at some point, and taking it into, from
but
what I understand,
not having it in your own way, you're not choosing at that time and place.
I think he was anticipating. His book, All That Matters, is due for publication on November the 7th. So there was going to be a big interview imminently anyway.
Yeah.
But
true.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that came out over the weekend for us in the media is the importance of language, which
Yes.
like we're writers, right? Like you'd think we would know this, but we haven't. We don't always get it right.
We
And
don't
I
have
think
medical
the media
degrees
in
either.
general. We don't have medical degrees. I mean, Kit, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but like we had some interactions, some discussion with members over the weekend, like trying to help educate us and sort of the proper way to talk about these things. Can you pass that on to our listeners here? Because it is, the words that we use in these situations really do matter. They matter not only to Chris Hoy, but to his family, to everybody else.
Absolutely. I mean,
loves and admires him.
the word that had been used and even in the original interview with the Times was terminal. Now, my understanding, conveniently, my dad is a cancer doctor, so I was able to have a conversation with him. I also have a close family friend who died a few years ago of prostate cancer, but he had been given a, in quotes, terminal diagnosis 10 years before he passed away, and he was not meant to survive that long. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen with Chris. Hopefully it is, but so terminal is not the same thing as incurable or advanced. Terminal means that you're in palliative care and the disease in its current state is what's going to kill you. But it's if he's got 2 to 4 years left, if that's what he's been told, then they have got options. Whether it's surgery or chemo, radiotherapy. There are ways that he can approach this in action rather than in the palliative sense. So but essentially it's the diagnosis is you have a disease that you're going to live with for the rest of your life. At some point it will kill you, but it's not at that point yet.
Thank you. Yeah, we just wanted to, take a brief moment because, like I said, we were educating ourselves over the weekend, and a little moment to educate the audience out there. Be careful with the words that you use around things like this. They're hard enough moments as they are.
I think what I would add is that the way that I think we should try and approach it is to take cues from Chris Hoy, because he himself he has been outspoken in one sense, but at the same time as this news came out, he was doing live coverage with on the World Championships, and it wasn't mentioned. Obviously, I think it was right that it wasn't, because he is continuing to live his life, and so it's not we should not be eulogizing him because he's still here, and he's going to still be very present and be taking action and continuing to inspire. But we don't know how long. So yeah, it's a difficult one to I will admit I was pretty rocked by it because he's been a huge inspiration to me. But yeah, I'm taking cues from him.
Well said, Kit.
Yeah, thank you, Kit. I think that's how we're going to wrap up the main show today. We're going to stick, for real vibe shift purposes, we're gonna stick Wout van Aert in squirrel suits into After Dark today. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to leave the free version of the show here, and when we come back in After Dark, for members only, we're going to talk Wout van Aert in a squirrel suit. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week.